Hello there, I'm the Gaming Fan. Welcome to a book review for SCP Iris Through the Looking Glass. Now you're probably wondering, Gaming Fan, what the heck are you doing making a book review on a gaming channel? Now I've got a good answer for you. Shut. No, but in all seriousness, there is a reason. Mainly because the SCP universe has been around before the games, but really the only reason you and I know about SCP is because of games like SCP Containment Breach, or maybe 087B, or maybe, what's that one called? But either way, you probably know about SCP because of the video games. And because of how important it is to the gaming industry and the horror scene, then I figured it would be pretty okay to post a SCP book review on my channel. And although I do have a lot of other game franchise books I could review, I got like FNAF, Halo, and Star Wars isn't just gaming, but I got that too. Those are way more popular, so I figured it'd probably get lost in. Also, I don't really want to. But Iris Through the Looking Glass is very interesting. I'm going to have non-spoilers and spoilers, and I'll let you know before the spoilers show up. So I actually never picked it up. I went to Books A Million for like 4 or 5 days and just read it. I just read it until I finished it. But looking at the price, I actually wouldn't mind buying it still, just to reread it over again. So that tells you that I did enjoy the book. I'm trying to think of the negatives first. I have 2 problems with it. One's not really too bad. The other one is that the stakes for an SCP book aren't very high most of the time. There is one really intense part where the stakes are quite high. They're quite high. And the other thing I didn't like is that, well, it's not even that I didn't like the stakes thing, it's just that the stakes weren't as high as I expected it to be out of an SCP book. However, I did still enjoy the story despite that. So the other thing I didn't like was how the dialogue was handled. So the main character does not speak with the normal dialogue, system with, the quotation marks and all that. Although every other character speaks like that, this one doesn't. His thoughts are put onto the book, but it doesn't really tell you if he's saying these things to the characters. So sometimes the characters will just kind of randomly reply to the book, supposing that he said that, and sometimes you have to do a double take because you can't tell if, like, wait, he said all that? Okay, and then it makes you think more than necessary. I didn't like that a whole lot, but again, it didn't really bug me too much. That's just like one of the really only things I really didn't like about it, but I still enjoyed it despite that. And it's not like it's even hard to read or anything. It's just kind of like you had to rethink the scene in your head because apparently he's actually talking in this part because this person replied to this. So as for the story itself, without spoiling anything, I believe I remember the back of the book, what it said. Basically, the main character, whose name is redacted, not his name isn't redacted. His name is redacted. So, main character keeps finding this weird image everywhere, and it's just the cover of the book. He basically keeps finding the cover of this book all over the place. This random girl with a camera, and he sees it in every book he opens and everything. I thought that was really cool. Like, it's just like super intriguing mystery type of thing. And so if I go any further than that, you'd be spoiling it. So, I did enjoy the book. If I were to try to recommend it to people... Also, I found it in my manga section of my local Books A Million for some reason. Even though I looked up what makes a manga, it is not... You cannot classify this as a manga under any definition at all. Like, it just doesn't work. So, you may find it in your manga section of your local bookstore. Or maybe it's purchasable digitally, I don't know. But, either way, if I were to somehow recommend this book, I would say it's really good. It expands on SCP still. If all you know is the games, I'd say it would still expand on SCP pretty well. Just because the book is sort of, it's like slice of life in an SCP containment facility. that might be spoiling it a little bit, but not really. I'm just kind of trying to label it a little bit. So if you don't like that, but if you don't normally like slice of life stuff, then the SCPs are there to compensate for that, right? Because some of the SCPs, fan favorites are here, And then there's some that I had no idea existed, right? And actually, one in the SCP Unity remake that wasn't in the original SCP Containment Breach is featuring in this book. As a pretty important part, I'd say, all things considering. But I don't know if this is spoiling it, so I guess okay. So I'm going to stop right here. If I were to give it a number rating, I'm only giving a book a number rating because I can't just say I recommend it. I don't really know how else to say how good it is. But I would say I enjoyed it pretty good. Like, it's a solid 7.5 probably. Yeah, I'd give it a 7.5, I guess, out of 10. It's not like the best book I ever read or the best story I ever read. And mainly, I'd say it'd go up to an 8 if that dialogue thing wasn't a problem. I just really enjoyed it myself, and I enjoyed learning more about the SCP world. So, if you want to buy it based on that, go ahead, because I'm going to start getting into spoilers right now. So if you leave, then... Sorry. If you leave, then thanks for watching. And, now we are going to get into spoilers. So essentially, the SCPs that are here are either important or they, like, raise the stakes. So the one part I said where the stakes are really high is when the main character goes to the Carnival of Horrors. I did not know this existed before I read this book, and I was tensed, and I was it was kind of scary to think about, because it was specific about what was happening in that part of the story. It was detailed, and I didn't like it. It was quite scary. But that's the only part where the stakes are high, because the main character is actually a sub-SCP. I don't know what they actually call it, but like, you have SCP-087, and then you have like SCP-087-B, right? So like a subsidiary of that SCP. So your main character is actually a subsidiary SCP since he has been affected by one. And so now he's got to stay in the SCP containment facility. And so they try experimenting with the main character and Iris, who is the actual SCP. I don't remember the number, but she is the SCP with the camera, which has the ability to, like, dimension travel, I guess? And time travel, maybe? As long as pictures taken with that camera were involved. And so, since you were affected by that time travel or that dimension travel, then you are that, I keep saying you because I'm so used to talking about video games, that the main character has been affected by that. And so they use a picture of the Carnival of Horrors to send him back in time. But then they suddenly realize, since he's the only one who can do this, maybe it's not a good idea to keep sending him through on these super dangerous, missions and possibly risk him getting killed. So they started using him for more, lowbrow practical things, mainly like lost research or something. Go get some intel from the past or something like that. They use him for more normal purposes, so the stakes were lowered drastically. However, there is another SCP in this book that just made me uncomfortable the whole time. I was so worried that this guy would come out and do something. It's the freaking teddy bear. Now, if you don't know what the teddy bear does, essentially, he's perfectly fine until one day he decides to start taking the ears off of a bunch of humans. I don't even remember if they're alive or not, or if they're dead, or if he kills them and then takes their ears off. I don't remember. And make a copy of himself made of ears. I don't know if you just heard that lightning. Holy crap! I gotta hurry it up. Well, I got surge protected power brick, so we should be good. But the bear, the original bear, the actual stuffed teddy bear that looks like something from Build-A-Bear, it looks normal and it's actually very nice to people. And it's actually given free roam around the facility. But Iris is used to it, and she's like, "Oh, look at this! Look at the cute bear," and all that stuff. The main character, he turns around and the bear is looking at him weird. And I'm like, no. I hate that. The bear was looking at him weird, and I could have sworn the bear was going to come back. Why is Audacity not freaking functioning? Anyways, what was I saying? Audacity just freaking decided to take an absolute dump and just stop functioning for like a whole minute and a half right there in the middle of recording and never respond for some reason. Stop it, I know. Jeez, why is it so dark now? Jeez, is it gonna be that bad? Anyways, the teddy bear made me nervous the whole time, and I think if I remember correctly, he actually disappears, and it's reported that the teddy bear disappeared. So that got me really worried. He never showed back up though. And the ending of the book is actually learning that the main character is actually a duplicate from another dimension. Or timeline, I guess. Because he's actually still alive in that dimension that he is currently in. There's somebody just like him. He's still going to school. He's got his exact DNA. Oh my god, it's doing it again. Whatever. His exact DNA. Yeah, his exact DNA, his exact, blood cells. He's got everything exactly like him. So I really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend you check it out. I don't want this video to be too long. I also don't want Audacity to freaking crash in the middle of exporting. But yeah, I really recommend it if you like the SCP universe. You might, there are a few SCPs I didn't know existed. And then there were a couple of fan favorites in terms of the safe ones. Like, Carnival of Horrors is in there. The Machine is in there. I don't remember what SCP classification it is. And then there's, like, the teddy bear, like I said. So that's going to do it for me. Be sure to tune in next time whenever we get struck by lightning and get superpowers. Yeet!